Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whatever the fuck you're watching this. This is episode 13 of RosinBaggers podcast, brought to you by Backyard Sports. How you doing, Ty?
Doing well. Fresh off last night's excitement in baseball. Wearing the stash today in support of the great Miles Michaelis. He was one strike away from history for the St. Louis Cardinals. Haven't had a no-hitter since the year 2001. We'll throw in the name Bud Smith at you for all you baseball historians. That was the last Cardinal to throw a no-hitter. Miles Michaelis just pitched a phenomenal performance last night against the Pittsburgh Pirates. Equally as impressive, St. Louis Cardinals faithful showing up 33,000 for a Tuesday against the Pirates. Are you kidding me? St. Louis showing up for their baseball team, and they're playing some pretty good baseball to boot. 2.5 clear of the Milwaukee Brew Crew, but currently losing to Pittsburgh. We'll monitor. We got a lot to get to, lots to in store. All-Star breaks coming up right around the corner. I'm ready. For 13.
Awesome. Hey, you know what those attendance numbers on a Tuesday against a stellar team tell me? Dear Oakland, dear Baltimore, dear Kansas City, and every other team that claims we can't get fans in the ballpark, looking at you, Cincinnati. Put a fucking winning product on the field and you'll sell tickets. People want to go to games. They don't want to go to games to watch players nobody wants on their fucking team. Don't sell everybody that's worth half a fucking penny from your franchise and expect fans to still shell out shekels to go to games.
Amen.
And I do want to comment. I love Margot's comment after the game. Not Margot, your manager's name.
Marmol.
Margot. I had Margot on my head because I watched him drop a ball yesterday for Tampa that let in runs for New York that was a routine fly ball. But anyway, back to Marmol. His comment, if Bader doesn't get to that ball, nobody gets to that ball. Yep. Dude, Bader gave that a fucking college try. How just like the moment that would have been if he'd have made that catch. Like that goes back to like catches that you see Granderson in center field for Detroit during Verlander's no-hitter there. And like just those moments that you get, that would have just been like peak no-hit saver. 8 2/3 leading up to that. If that had been out number 27, fuck, that would have been a highlight forever. That would have been unbelievable.
And if Bader's playing normal depth, if Bader's playing where Bader normally plays in that situation, that is a can of corn routine fly ball out for Harrison Bader. But the situation calls for a little bit different approach. You don't want to get beat by a Texas blooper that beats you for a no-hitter. If you're going to get your no-hitter foiled, it's going to have to be on a hard hit ball. And it was an extremely well-hit baseball that hit the warning track, hopped over the wall. But if Bader's playing where he normally does, he runs that down easy peasy lemon squeezy. Cardinals get the no-hitter. But alas, still got the W, and that's the most important thing. And what about Michaelis's comments? He put it on himself, hard on himself, saying that it was, his pitches and maybe, his defense really had to all day. And, defense really had to work. I didn't pitch my best. Humble as all be out for one of the best pitching performances that St. Louis has seen in a very long time.
And the cojones on the home plate umpire, and kudos to him because the ball was outside, right? It was outside. It was a couple inches off the plate. But to not just punch him out with 2 strikes and a no-hitter, like, I wanted to see him do it, but good on him. Like, he got it right? He got it right, and it is what it is. But, man, we almost had history yesterday. I know as a Cardinals fan, you were tuned in, edge of your seat.
It's the whole jinx situation, too. I didn't want to alert you guys. Listen, it was on my radar from like inning 4 on. I'm like, all right, well, he isn't allowed to hit yet. But where do you draw the line? Like, where do you tell your buddies, hey, we got a no-no situation? Because every time you say we got a no-no situation, we both got the jinx working really well in our favor. For and against. If we're talking trash on a team, they're going to go win a 5-game winning streak. If we're talking good on a team, except for the Yankees, who just apparently all they do is win.
Yeah, they're immune to it.
They're immune to the curse. So I wasn't going to like alert you guys at the 7th inning stretch and being like, hey, just a heads up, we got history potential. I know Stove ain't watching it anyway because it's the Cardinals and he's got better stuff to do than watch my baseball team. But finally, like when it got to the ninth, I'm like, okay, I can let the boys know, hey, potential history here. Let's tune in to
We got
Pittsburgh and
so
St.
close
Louis.
to. Oh man. Anyway, all that aside, let's talk about last week. The series we highlighted. You had Rangers White Sox. What'd you think of this one?
I am so glad I had Rangers and White Sox in this one because this turned out to be a very, very intriguing series, and it's got a couple storylines that are lingering into this week, and I think are going to be very big focal points in the very near future in terms of what Chicago is going to do and how they are going to move forward as a baseball franchise. We had the Fire Tony chants from the Chicago faithful on the South Side start to come into play, and you could hear it loud and clear. More on that in just a little bit. We didn't hear them on Friday because the White Sox picked up the win. Pick up a key win in game one of the series. Close battle all throughout. The offense for the Chicago White Sox explodes. They pick up 5 runs in the 8th. Yasmani Grandal does what Grandal does. He hits a 2-run double and opens up the floodgates from there. They end up plating 5. They win the first game against the Texas Rangers. And then Texas, who I said is a sneaky 2 seed in the AL West right now. I don't want to say they're playing great baseball, but they're playing consistent baseball at this point. And for a team that I thought was going to be competing with the Oakland A's for the first round draft pick or the cellar or however you want to say it, I thought they would be pretty competitive for the worst team in baseball. Consistent baseball is good for them, and they're winning some games as they did on Saturday, thanks in part to the White Sox bullpen, which has really been a huge question mark this year. It was one of the things I thought Chicago going into the season was definitely the strongest at, with Liam Hendricks closing things out. Quite frankly, I didn't know if they needed anybody else because he's proven that he can go in the 8th and get you 6 outs if you need to go 6 outs, get you 3 outs if you need to go 3. Well, this just in, Liam Hendricks is now on the IL. He's on the shelf, and that's going to be some big problems for Chicago moving forward because they got to figure out what to do with that closing situation because their bullpen had a drastic, dreadful weekend. They blew a 5-run lead on Saturday, ended up losing 11-9 and 10 to the Rangers. The Fire Tony chants start to come into play, which, if we're being 100% honest, I think the Fire Tony chants are still a continuation from their series against the Dodgers, a series that Chicago really wanted to prove that they belong in this baseball conversation among the best baseball teams. And you had maybe the most unconventional, intentional walk in a loss that I have seen in a long time. 2 strikes on a guy. And at that point, you decide to put him on. Well, what's they do? But their very next batter turns around, hits the home run, and the Dodgers end up winning the game on when you had 1 strike to go. The intentional walk call with 2 strikes, I think, really started to get to fans to start to say, what the hell is this guy doing? It's Tony La Russa. He's a Hall of Fame manager, but he's getting up there in age, and I think people are honestly thinking like he's losing his touch a little bit. So the Chicago faithful not excited with what they're seeing from Tony La Russa. Sox were the clear-cut favorite to win the Central. This season's been an absolute struggle. They ended up losing the series finale to the Rangers after the Rangers turned another unconventional play where they turned the old fly ball to left field, fire down to third base, grab the guy that's trying to go from second to third. They 7-5 double play to end the game. Rangers win it in extras. More bad news for the White Sox. We mentioned the Liam Hendricks going on the disabled list for an already struggling bullpen. And now Michael Kopech, who I thought was one of the strong pieces of that starting rotation. He left the game after just 13 pitches, still waiting to hear more on his diagnosis at the moment. The Sox at one point, or at that point, I should say, had lost 4 of their last 5 games. So the pressure and the intensity in the water is really boiling under Tony La Russa's ass right now. Thankfully, he starts off this week with 2 games against the Detroit Tigers. They're able to pick up 2 and kind of quiet the noise for a little bit. But this is still a baseball team. My main takeaway from this series was Chicago's got a lot of questions to answer, and they got to do it in a hurry. Because this is a baseball team that everybody thought was going to be the clear-cut favorites to win the Central and might be even the second-best team in the American League. You could have debated that with the Yankees and Houston in there. But Chicago was, among a lot of people's contenders to make it to the ALCS. And here's a team that is now on the 15th day of June, still one game under 500, still 5 games back of Minnesota for the AL Central lead. And then when you take a look at the potential wildcard picture, well, that's slipping away because, as you mentioned before the show started, you said take a look at these AL East standings, and they're absolutely bizarre. Toronto, who is 9 games clear of 500 at 36-25, is 9 games back of the New York Yankees. Oh, just a half a game back from them is Tampa Bay, and Boston, who has won 8 of their last 10 games. They're in the mix with 33 wins. So you have a potential where the AL East is going to be snagging up every single one of those wild card spots. And second place in the AL Central is not as good as it looked a month ago, because the AL East is going to be a battle, and you're going to see some of the best baseball out in that division for sure. So Chicago's in trouble. They got to find something to do with their pitching rotation. Their bullpen certainly needs to get bolstered up here at the trade deadline if they want to make a run as being contenders. Or are we going to see the exact opposite? Are we going to see a Chicago team that's now 1 game out of the 500 mark, that's sitting back in third as Cleveland was able to overtake them this weekend? Do we see Chicago sell some of their big offensive names? Is Tim Anderson as happy as Tim Anderson wants to be? He is a huge, huge piece of trade bait if the White Sox were to float that out into the water to see what they could get. So I'll be very curious to see what the White Sox are going to be here in the very near future. My main takeaway is if you're a White Sox fan, or if you're a Chicago baseball fan and you knew that the Cubs were going to be rebuilding and you had your hopes pinned on the Chicago White Sox team, you're hitting the panic button in Chicago right now, because there is some serious problems with these AL contenders.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tony La Russa, and being unconventional has always kind of been his thing, right? Mm-hmm. He was the first guy to put the pitcher in the 8 slot. Yep. Played a lot of small ball in weird ways and asked some hitters to do things that you wouldn't conventionally think that they would ask guys to do. First guy to really be willing to kind of stretch the bullpen, at least, from the perspective of, I'm willing to get guys in the game early and rotate through a lot. The first guy that I remember doing it really in terms of embracing kind of what strengths the bullpen can bring. So there's unconventional, but I think you hit it on the head, right? Like with the intentional walk, and it resulted in a loss, and maybe, who knows, right? With 2 strikes, maybe he hits a dinger, but it's odd. You don't intentionally walk somebody. I think it was an 0-2 count too.
Yeah,
it wasn't just
1-2, I think. Yeah,
it might have been 1-2, but he was ahead in the count, and he just said, "I'll put him on." Weird, unconventional, but I think that some of the shine wears off when you look at these things and it doesn't result in what you want it to result in. This Chicago White Sox team should not be 3rd place. They should not be 2 games behind the Cleveland Guardians, mm-hmm. of all teams, in that division for 2nd place. So it's not that they're just 5 games back of the Twins. They've got a team between them who's also a couple of games ahead of them, who is surprisingly, I don't know that anybody would pick Cleveland to really be 3 games above 500 in the middle of June, but they're playing really good baseball. They're getting a lot of good pitching. They've got Bieber, of course, is the headliner there, but they're getting a lot of good pitching and they're playing solid ball. And
Plesac really came on for Cleveland in the last couple of days.
Absolutely. So, I'm with you. And with the Rangers, they just seem to be kind of treading water, and maybe that's good, for them, kind of the way they started the season. To even be near 500 right now is probably a win for them. All right, let's get to my series here. I was looking at the Braves and the Pirates, and not because I thought it was going to be a super competitive series, but because I'm projecting ahead. And I'm going to do it again with the preview, not to spoil anything, but I'm projecting ahead with this series because the Braves right now have feasted on, 1, they're playing better baseball, and 2, they've been playing some subpar teams. They've played the Pirates, they've played the Nats, they played the Diamondbacks, they played the Rockies. They've had a pretty good stretch here where they've been able to capitalize, and they've made up a lot of ground on the Mets. But they're also right now leading. It was 3-0 last I checked, and right now they're at 3-1 and bottom 6. So if that score holds, they've now stretched the winning streak to 14, right? So that's what I was looking at with this Pirates series, and the Braves took care of business, right? They handled the Pirates. They're hitting the ball. Duvall's hitting the ball a country mile every time he's at the plate. But, oh, by the way, the guy that they didn't start the season with, who we all talked about as the superstar, is now playing as a superstar. We talked a little bit about this last week in the preview of this series. Acuna is just – he's on Mars right now. And you mentioned Goldschmidt, right? We're talking about him being on a different planet. Like, those two are up there on the red planet just hanging out, playing baseball like nobody's business. So, with the Braves, they took care of business with the Pirates. They won these games the way they should win these games when they're playing ball well. And we're looking at a team that might push this streak to 14 tonight. And I'm curious to see how far this can go.
Speaking of Goldie, he is up in a pressure situation right now. Bottom of the fifth, St. Louis down 1 to Pittsburgh. Runner up second, that's B-Dov over there. Donovan at second, Goldie at the plate. And he just looked at a hanging curveball that he probably could have crushed a country mile. That one hurts.
He's looking for the fastball.
4 home runs in his last 3 games. Paul Goldschmidt is absolutely on fire right now.
What's his on-base streak up to now?
Oh, God.
Close to 30 now, right?
Yeah. I think he was at 29.
Okay.
29.
Nice.
Entering tonight's action, and he just grounds to the shift. Dov over to third. Paul Goldie goes in the dugout. Oh, well.
Wow.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, they found ways to lose in miraculous fashion, I feel like. And I don't know, looking back on that Atlanta series, how much Atlanta just absolutely roasted them from cover to cover. I don't know if they had any situations where they had to turn it over to their bullpen, but if they have to turn it over to their bullpen, it's rough. I mean, they're throwing their starters for absolutely as long as they can go, because every time it turns to their bullpen, things just unravel, and it's a disaster. And for St. Louis to get 2 wins already in this 4-game set against the Pittsburgh Pirates, in 2 of those games, St. Louis found extraordinary ways to win, including some very clever plays on the base paths. But it's just been, if you're Pittsburgh, you get off to a lead and you start to see that get chipped away, and then you say, oh, no, here we go again. And that mentality has to be firmly planted in their brains right now. And I don't know what you do from a managerial standpoint or from a team standpoint to get rid of that mental blockage there, because if you're in a close situation, history tells you it's going to go the opposite way for you. And so far, they have not been able to close things out. I mean, Pittsburgh would be an above 500 team if games ended after the 5th inning at the halfway point. But they just have not found ways to close out games, and they're looking very well at another one of those scenarios tonight. Get off to a 4-1 lead. St. Louis is chipping away, and Contreras is starting to struggle on the mound. So could very well be another comeback win for the Cards.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe that 5-inning thing will be the next thing they test in the minor leagues after this whole moving the bases fucking thing.
For sure.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk week 12, or not week 12, but this week. I think it actually is like week 12 technically of the season. But looking ahead to next week's set of games, you've got Yankees-Rays, and that one very, very intriguing. Rays aren't in second place, but that is 2 teams well above 500 playing really good baseball, and they just played a really good series a couple of days ago. What do you got for this one?
Well, I'm telling you, from this standpoint, you want to see if there's any team that draws up any sort of game plan or finds any kryptonite for the New York Yankees. You want to see a team. You want to see if the Yankees are human. And that's really the premise behind this whole Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday series. And it's, you got a Rays team that really has historically they're not an easy out by any stretch of the imagination. And I think that's the biggest compliment I can give a team that continues to be competitive year in and year out, year after year after year. And that's Tampa Bay. And they're not an easy out. And,
and they play in the big nursing home.
Oh yeah, the old St. Pete's Dome, and that's just tons of fun for all their 8 fans that go to support the Rays, and they have to manufacture all the sound, and it's just really weird. Um, Tampa is a team, and I'll go back and use another Cards reference here. We picked up a big series win against the Brewers, and you turn around and you have to play the Rays, and the Rays sweep your ass. The Rays are a good baseball team, and they can really humble teams that are feeling really good about themselves. You got a New York Yankees team that's sitting at 9-1 in their last 10. They've won 5 in a row. They're currently up on the Tampa Braves to start off this Wednesday. They'll play again on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week back in St. Pete's, but currently up on the Rays right now by a 4-1 scoreline. I'm just seeing it for Tampa to close a little ground on Toronto as well. Toronto was able to sneak ahead, and they played some pretty good baseball as of late. This just in, Vlad Guerrero Jr. is on fire as of late. He's starting to find his home run swing again, and as Vladdy goes, as do the Jays. So yeah, really interested to see if the Rays can just kind of keep pace here in this. What I'm just going to say at this point looks to be a wild card race with Toronto. And looks to be a wild card race with Boston, because I don't know if anybody can catch New York the way they're playing, the way their rotation has been dealing, the way their bullpen has been closing the door for them, the way their offense has just been absolutely lights out. We'll see it here on my AL All-Star ballot. We've got several good candidates from New York making the All-Star game, but you got some good pitching matchups in here as well. I think highlighted by the Cortez and McClanahan matchup. That'll lead things off on Monday. Then it's Severino versus Fleming, Montgomery versus Baz in the Wednesday finale over there in Tampa. But it's a good AL East clash, and a Tampa team that I really, really want to see it get all put together from the offensive end, because I think that they're starting to get the pieces into the rotation a little bit. Defensively, they're sound as anybody. I think if they can get all the sticks going at once, they're sort of a team that Randy Arozarena will get hot, and then he'll cool off, and then Lau will get hot, and then he'll cool off, and all of a sudden here comes Mejia, and he'll hit a couple dingers, and then he goes absolutely ice cold, like colder than vanilla ice in that 1980s rap classic that he did. If they can get everybody playing at the same level, and oh, by the way, we forgot to mention Wander Franco, but he always plays good baseball. I don't think that guy ever goes on a cold streak, but if they can get everybody together and start to string some offense together, I think this Tampa Bay team can make just equally as good a run as New York. New York went on quite a bit of a winning streak. They're on another one now. I think that's a team that can put something like what we saw in Atlanta and close the gap on the New York Mets. That's a team that has double-digit win streak potential, and I'm curious to see if that comes to fruition here against the Yankees, or will the Yankees continue to roll? And if they can continue to roll, I think we can safely say in June that it's going to take a momentous collapse for the Yankees not to win the AL East and be the top seed in the American League.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned how streaky some of the Rays players can be. Just like as good as their good is, if they get a handful of guys to get hot at the same time, like they could put up 10, 12 runs a game on you. And oh, by the way, they've got the arms to back it up. They just roll, 8, 10 guys out of that rotation in that bullpen that can touch triple digits. So yeah, the Rays are scary good if they get everything going. But man, the Yankees have just been fucking unreal this year.
So good.
Yeah, go vanilla ice for sure.
VIP. Collaborate.
One time, boy.
Corners.
All right, so I spoiled it a little bit in the lead up here, but I want to highlight Braves Giants, and I'm highlighting this as an optimist because I look at what the Braves have between today and when they play the Giants. So they're finishing up a series with the Nats that'll get them to 14, and then they've got the Cubs for a few games, and they're gonna approach 20 wins because they had one more series, and it's eluding me. I got to check it again real quick because they're going to be around 20 if they continue to win between now and when they face the Giants here. And that's when we're really going to start this conversation about, the Giants could get them to 20, right? I'm being the optimist here, and I'm starting to talk about the chase, right? Because we saw it with the Twins in 2017, running down the American League record. The A's almost did it back in Billy Beane Moneyball days and got close to touching that AL record. Twins. My buddy and I did this earlier and screwed it up. I was looking at the Twins. He said Twins. The formerly Indians, now Guardians, 22 wins in a row, set the AL record. 26 is the NL record. So what's interesting for the Braves is if they can get to this Giants series, sweeping the Nats and then sweeping the Cubs. Sorry, Stove, RIP. But if they can get to the Giants, they've got the Giants and the Dodgers that could get them right there in the ballpark. They're going to earn it, right? Yeah. If they're going to get to 26, they are going to earn it. And I want, selfishly, the Braves to keep winning, finish off my fucking hapless Nats. And again, sorry, Stove, sweep the Cubbies. Because that series is when you get to 17, that's when you start to talk about the chase. And I want that series to kind of be that, right? Let's start talking about what 20 could look like, what 22, 23, 24 could look like. So that's why I want to highlight this series. They may lose tonight. They may lose a game against the Cubs, and suddenly my preview is just two good teams playing each other. But selfishly, I want this to be the Braves going into the Giants with a chance to get to 20 and say, here we come for 26.
Well, and let's highlight the Braves win streak for a moment because, I go back to the way the Cardinals finished at the end of last year and 17 games to get into the playoff race. I mean, just to get into the playoffs, needed to rattle off 17 in a row. And I remember what an accomplishment that was for 2.5 weeks straight, just walking in every single morning, with a big smile on my face. We're playing winning baseball. We're not dead yet. We're not out of the playoff race yet. Then you flash forward and you take a look at some of these series and, 4 games, a 4-game stand, a home stand. You're at home. You're a home ballpark and you could be playing the worst team in the league and you could be the very best team in the league. And in 4 games, odds are that the opposing team is going to win one of those games. A 4-game home sweep is a remarkable feat in and of itself. So to rattle off 13 wins and counting, 13 wins and counting for the Braves is something truly remarkable. 20 is such an unbelievable number, and it's going to take some remarkable baseball here within the next week to reach that stage. And as you mentioned, their opponents that they've got coming up, win streak be damned. If they have it, great. If they don't, I'm still curious to see this Braves team who has rattled off 13 wins against some, no offense, fairly inferior opponents, waiting to see them up against some plus 500 competition and seeing if this Braves team is for real. So, yeah, the win streak has been absolutely remarkable. 20 is an insane number that I don't think that there's a lot of teams that will ever come close to. So anytime you even start remotely talking about that streak, and we hear about it, like the hitting streak comes into conversation when a player is like at 15 game hitting streak because we just don't see it that often. So yeah, just with you here, if the Braves can get there, it's can't miss TV.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Even if the Braves don't get there, I still think this series is can't miss TV because I'm just curious to see them up against some better competition here in the National League.
Yeah, right. If they lose a game between here and now, or even if they lose game 1 of that series, the remaining 3 games of that series are 2 teams that are going to be in the playoff picture, putting their, showcasing themselves against other competition of that same level. So.
And don't forget, one thing that we're not talking about with the Atlanta Braves is the impact that the Ozzie Albies injury is going to have. Ozzie Albies with the foot fracture, that he is such a key piece of this Braves puzzle. So for him to now thankfully have a successful foot surgery, but looks like he is going to miss some extended time here for Atlanta. Curious to see how that will impact things. What their middle infield looks like with just Dansby Swanson is kind of the main anchor, with Ozzie Albies and Dansby, that's as solid as a middle infielder as there is. in baseball. So, he's great with the bat too, or solid with the bat. So that's a key injury here in the middle of a winning streak.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right, we'll hit State of the Union here real quick. All right, so before we jump into our all-star conversation, let's look at the State of the Union for a couple of teams. And you want to highlight the Volunteers.
Tennessee Volunteers, old Rocky Top playing after every single run crosses the plate, which probably played about 656 times this season because Tennessee had a pretty damn good baseball team this just in. The number one seed, if you're just catching up on the college baseball ranks, has gone down. It was a topsy-turvy weekend in terms of super regional competition because 3 of the 4 top seeds went down, something that has not happened, I believe, since they kind of shifted the format to the regionals and super regionals and seeded everything out. So your top 4 seeds, 3 of your top 4 seeds go down, and Tennessee was among them. But what a storybook year it was for the Tennessee Volunteers. All year, this had been Tennessee versus the world. You as a college football fan will appreciate the analogy. Tennessee was the late 1980s Miami Hurricanes because they played with that sort of swagger that the old guard absolutely cannot stand. We have the iconic image of Gilbert turning around and saying, "What the fuck?" to the umpire after a blown ball call ended up being a 3rd strike. Gilbert gets tossed. Coach Vitello, who reminds me of a Bo Pelini, who is just mad at every single call. He's out of the dugout with his hair on fire, getting into the umpires, bumping into the umpires, just being big and loud and larger than life. And that's what this Tennessee team was for me. Now, all that said, 49 states are celebrating, and almost all of Nebraskans who are heading to the College World Series, who are not Omaha fans, are pretending to be Irish fans because the Irish did the old guard a favor this past weekend. They knocked off the cocky kids, the kids that played with an edge all season long, the kids that told you what they were going to do, did it, and then showed you what they did. The kids that played with more raw emotion, energy, and pure adrenaline than any team, college or pro, that I've ever seen. A remarkable team, irregardless of the outcome, that will go down as one of the historically greatest in college or professional baseball. National College Coach of the Year, 4 All-Americans, and of course the beat writers are going to have their say, and they're going to say that cockiness got in the way, and they should have focused on their opponents and not themselves. But that's not what won them 57 fucking games.
Right.
That's not where they got only 9 losses on the season. This Tennessee team played this way, and where I will give them huge accolades and accommodations is they played this way from the very start. They had gone on with this is the style that we're going to play. The image after the home run ball, and he's rounding first, and he's got the middle finger. Fuck you, dude! I totally dug it. The bat flips, the emotion, the getting the dugout fired up with whatever the hell, going down to 2 knees and raising up your and everybody else following suit. Everything about it was awesome from a baseball fan. Everything about it got you into the game, and nothing was more clear than the Tennessee faithful. I have images of England returning to the World Cup for the first time in like 40 years. And you remember the scene from the English pubs where you just saw beer flying all over the place because they were jumping up and down for joy, and their full beers were just exploding in the air, and it just looked like mass confetti everywhere. You saw that at a baseball field. When the fuck have we seen that kind of emotion out of baseball fans? Because their fan base, for as much trash as people are going to talk about this Tennessee team, their fan base was equally bought in as their players and their staff. And it was one whole cohesive unit that made 57 games a possibility. We are probably in college baseball ranks not going to see above 50 in a very long time. So for Tennessee to get 57-9, make a super regional, go all the way down to the wire, they were fun to watch. Now, they would have been the outcasts had they made it to Omaha, and I would have loved to.
That would have been fun to watch.
I would have bought tickets to go just be a fly on the wall in that baseball game, because that's the way they were. And it was Tennessee versus the world, and in this particular instance, I was definitely on Team Tennessee because I love seeing that in baseball. It made it fun to watch. To see those kids play with that kind of raw emotion was just an absolute. It brought me back to my playing days, and everything that you wanted to do as a baseball player, but it wasn't socially acceptable to do at the time. You saw those kids do it, and you said, "Hell yes, let's go!" Absolutely, was on Team Tennessee when it was Tennessee versus the world. Really shitty that they're not going to be in the College World Series this year, but they had a hell of a year, and absolutely nothing but props. The State of the Union is extremely strong, and I don't want to see them lose that. I don't want to see them lose that edge next year because it didn't work this year. And I don't want to see him read headlines. I don't want to see him get caught up into the well, if you guys were less charismatic and more focused on your opponents. No, fuck that. Do you, Tennessee, because you is a strong State of the Union.
Hell yeah. They were a fucking stacked team too. I really thought it was, honestly, I thought it was them in the field going to Omaha. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame played some good ass baseball though, and that's a scary team in Omaha. All right, I want to look at the Padres because as we speak, surprise, surprise, the Padres are tied for first place in the NL West. They're behind on percentage points, but in terms of game for game, they are tied with the LA Dodgers, 15 games above 500. And guess who they're still waiting for?
And who might be out a little longer?
I hear he's having some potentially setbacks. Some minor setbacks. Yeah, so they're playing good baseball.
Mm-hmm.
So take your time, Taddy. Take your time. Get healthy. Be ready to go. Get back in like August. Give yourself 45 days to get ready for playoff baseball because this team is fucking good. And if they add Mr. All-World Fernando Tatis, God, how much better can they get? How much deeper does that lineup get? How much more dangerous does that lineup get? Not just from him at the plate, but also what he does on the base paths to put pressure on the other team, the way he plays defense, one of the probably 2 or 3 best shortstops in the league in terms of defensive prowess. So that's a guy that, I mean, they're missing him, but they're also playing really, really good baseball. And it is surprising to say in the middle of June that this team, who is waiting for Mr. MVP to come back from the crazy injury that he got, they are tied with the juggernaut LA Dodgers. And if you ask Dave Roberts, the World Series champion, LA Dodgers, but the Padres are tied with them right now. And the Giants are looking up on not just the Dodgers, they're looking up on 2 teams right now. It's the State of the Union, as you said, with Tennessee, the State of the Union with San Diego right now, very strong. They are getting good pitching. They're hitting the ball. They have more people contributing to that lineup than they did last year, and they had a pretty strong lineup last year. They look good up and down, offensively, defensively, and on the mound.
Last year for San Diego, it was all about Slam Diego, right? And their offensive prowess and everything that they had going for them with just night in and night out, long bombs out in Petco Park. We all remember the scene. I mean, and their offense was fun to watch, swinging away on 3-0 counts. You love to see it. What I think flew totally under the radar with this San Diego team, and for all intents and purposes shouldn't have, was this starting 5 with Yu Darvish and Sean Manaea and Joe Musgrove, Blake Snell, Mackenzie Gore, who came up, and everybody knew Mackenzie Gore was going to be something special. You wondered what Blake Snell was going to turn around after sort of a slump year last year. Joe Musgrove, of course, he throws the no-hitter for San Diego, so we knew he's got the right stuff. And Sean Manaea coming over from the tanking Oakland A's. Suddenly, that rotation is just lights out and deadly. So it's a little bit of a 180 from where they were last year. This year, I think it's kind of the rotation being out in the forefront and really leading this team. They're still getting the offensive numbers to produce, but you seriously got to wonder, my God, how many games clear of the Dodgers could San Diego be if they had arguably the best player in baseball, or certainly the most charismatic hitter that just his name alone makes you pitch differently too? You wonder what would have happened if he doesn't decide to ride motorcycles all offseason.
Yeah, crazy. That pitching staff has really turned it on. You mentioned Snell too, and as much as he struggled last year, you thought, was it a bad move? And they go get Manaea and they double down, right? We're going to make this pitching staff good. And I think with a move like that too, I think you take a little bit of pressure off a guy like a Blake Snell, because there was a lot of expectation on him after being acquired via trade. And, those sorts of things do weigh on an athlete. And then you bring in a Sean Manaea, and you don't really have to say Blake Snell is our ace, standalone ace. We've got a couple of guys at the top of that rotation. And, oh, by the way, as you mentioned, Mackenzie Gore, who is just incredible, right? And we all knew the prospects, the potential was there. He is so good. He is so good. I look forward to watching him for the next 10, 12 years and probably winning a Cy Young or two.
No doubt. He's got Cy Young written all over him. What impresses me the most is Mackenzie Gore will do anything you ask him to.
Yep.
And he's been shuffled around a little bit this year, from the starting rotation to the bullpen, back to the starting rotation.
And
to the
never
bullpen.
batted an eye.
Never. At one point, does it change his mechanics? Does it change the way he throws? Mackenzie Gore is a guy that's going to go out there and pitch. He's not going to go out there and take the hill, or he's not going to give it a go. He's going to pitch. There are very few and far between guys that have really mastered that art of pitching as opposed to just going out there and throwing. And Mackenzie Gore has got the pitching aspect, and he's got Cy Young written all over him.
Yeah, for sure. A bulldog, man, for a young guy. A bulldog. All right, let's take a quick interlude here and do our salute to service, and then we're going to talk All-Star Game. All right, tonight's episode goes out to Sergeant First Class Michael J. Goebel. He died December 22nd, 2019, serving during Operation Freedom Sentinel. Goebel was 33 at the time of his passing. He died in December of 2019 of injuries sustained during combat operations in Kunduz Province, Afghanistan. He was a senior intelligence sergeant assigned to Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Special Forces Group. He was decorated with a Bronze Star with 3 oak leaf clusters, Army Commendation Medal with Valor Device, the Valorous Unit Award, Special Forces Tab, Combat Infantryman's Badge, Basic Airborne, and Military Freefall Jump Master badges. Decorated soldier. Sergeant First Class Michael J. Goebel. This episode goes to you. We have to watch. All right. So let's talk All-Star Game. So we're looking at the AL this week, and we're going to look at the NL next week, but we're getting pretty close to the Midsummer Classic here.
Ballots are out.
Yeah, ballots are out. So we wanted to talk about our picks, right? And we've got some spots where we disagree, but let's start here let's go down the lineup 1 through 9-ish and DH. So let's start with number 2 here, the catchers. So you have Salvi, and we're in lockstep here. I have Salvi. So I'm going to pass to you first. What are your thoughts on Salvi? What separated him? Because there's a couple of guys that I had in consideration as well. What separated him from the rest of the pack here as catcher, starting for the AL All-Stars for you?
It's a great question because I think there's a lot of Royals fans that might not consider Salvi to be the All-Star heir apparent because he's not putting up Salvi numbers from last year. Last year was an extraordinary year for any catcher, for any baseball player, let alone catcher. Salvi had an absolute phenomenal year, well-deserved of his All-Star accommodations. This year's been a slow start, but he's still Salvador Perez, and he's still, in my opinion, the best catcher in the American League. And, certainly the average is taking a little bit of a dump. He's sitting at 213. Last year, I think he was closer to that 300 line. But the run production is still there. The RBI production is still there. And the home run total is still there. And, here's another thing when I was looking at catchers. And this is just sort of where the dynamic has changed a little bit in Major League Baseball. The Royals don't have a 2. And when you're taking a look at stats and when you're taking a look at totals, you see a lot of teams in baseball going with a 1-2 punch. The Tampa Bay Rays do it with Mike Zunino and Francisco Mejia. You've got several catchers that really don't take the bulk of the workload anymore. Salvi's going to be a guy that's going to be behind the dish every night for the Royals, unless it's an absolute needed day off for him. So, a guy that just sits there and goes game in, game out, gets you those total numbers, and starting to warm up a little bit as we moved on in here to the summer months. He got off to a dreadfully slow start, but as he's picking up, you can still say it's still Salvador Perez, and I still think he's still the best catcher in the American League.
Yeah, you mentioned the average, and in today's game, like batting average is in the dumps for most people, right? Just with the way the game is, analytics, all or nothing. It's home runs, it's home runs or it's strikeouts, right? That's what we're aiming for. There's not a lot of catchers out there that you're going to be able to say are demonstrably better, even in just offensive production, and that's what I looked at with Perez. He's got 14, I think, bombs or 12, or nine. I'm sorry,
mm-hmm. Yep.
9 home runs on the season. But it's what you said, right? My all-star catcher needs to be the guy who commands the game, who brings it every night. There's a lot of platoons out there, and some of the other guys that are getting some consideration and some run are catching like 40 to 60% of their team's game, and they're platooning with somebody else. You talked about how often Salvi plays. You know how many games he played last year? 161. How many games are in a season? 162. So wow. He's going to play every fucking night. And I know some of those games that he played, he got some pinch hits here and there, but I think he caught 145 or 146 games last year. That's Yadi Molina in his prime numbers, mm-hmm. right? And that was always the big thing, like Yadi and Benito Santiago and some of those guys, Pudge Rodriguez, like they didn't take nights off because they were the guy that commanded the rotation and were the field general every single night. And that's that old school, what a catcher is supposed to be for a team. And that's what Salvi Perez is for me. And that's why I pushed the batting average aside and said, this is the best catcher. This is the guy I want to see on the field for the AL All-Stars. But I did give some consideration for Jose Trevino. I do want to make mention of him right now because I think what he's doing for the Yankees is pretty remarkable because you've mentioned how good that rotation is and that bullpen is. And he's been the guy really in the bulk of their games. He's in a little bit of a platoon there, but he's been the guy in the bulk of their games really calling the signs and getting those pitchers ready for games and getting them through their, through their paces through the games. And he's hit well. He's batting 300 and he's got 5 bombs on the season. It's a quiet 305 bombs because of the lineup he's in and how good they are. But I just wanted to give some shine there to a young guy who I think has potential. I know that the talk of Gary Sanchez was that like, oh yeah, this is the next, Jorge Posada and that sort of thing. I think Jose Trevino could be the next Jorge Posada for the New York Yankees.
My second choice would have been Adley Rutschman, but that was purely out of me wanting Adley Rutschman in the All-Star game and me being a fanboy for Adley Rutschman and less a little bit about his accolades.
Isn't that what the All-Star game's about, though?
By the way, right? Adley Rutschman got his first home run tonight. So
that's right. I did see that.
Adley Rutschman.
Absolutely. Get somebody. All right, so let's move from catcher to first base. So you have Anthony Rizzo at first base, and this is our first opportunity to have a little bit of a spirited discussion because we disagree. I have Ty France. So
who's been phenomenal.
Right. So make your case for Anthony Rizzo, Mr. Clutch.
Anthony Rizzo, I was really debating back and forth between Anthony Rizzo and my boy Vladdy Guerrero Jr. And I think had we done the All-Star ballot and had I done my All-Star ballot tonight, it might have gone flip-flopped back to Vladdy Guerrero Jr. after what Vladdy's done in his past couple games. These guys are neck and neck in terms of production right now in the American League. Ty France has had an absolutely stellar year. My point not to put Ty France in that particular position for the All-Star game is because he can play everywhere. He's literally a utility guy. So I'm like, well, he's kind of a first baseman, kind of not, kind of plays here, kind of plays there. I don't know if he's a first baseman or not, so I can't put him in. Ty France has been absolutely phenomenal. But Anthony Rizzo, my God, after getting shipped from Chicago at the end of last year when Chicago sold the farm, and really, I thought, kind of a rough adjustment period to baseball in the American League and to the American League's pitching staffs that he was facing.
The city of New York, too, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he played in Chicago, but like New York is a different animal.
It's a completely different beast. And this year he's handled everything extremely well and has really gotten back to the Anthony Rizzo we remember. And you know, we can throw the stat lines all over the board. You know, he's going to be on pace to get 100 RBIs this year. He's already on pace for 40 home runs, sitting at 15 right now, 36 runs scored, 41 batted in, 15 homers. But what I love most about Anthony Rizzo is the ice in his veins when he steps up to the plate in huge situations. And he always seems to deliver. And that, to me, is an all-star worthy quality of a baseball player. And I just like the rebound story because I had question marks about Anthony Rizzo coming into this year, and he's all but answered them so far. So for me, it's Rizzo back in an all-star jersey.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned it was the debate between him and Vlad. And for me, it was Ty and Vlad, right? And I respect what Rizzo's done. Mr. Clutch, ice in his veins, come up big in almost every situation they've had for him at the plate this year, delivered for sure. I kind of stole one here, and you mentioned it with Ty France being kind of utility guy, being able to play and be all over the field and whatnot. And his eligibility at first base is what it is. That's where he's played the bulk of his games, so he's AL All-Star eligible at first base, right? For you fantasy players, he's eligible all over the fucking place.
he's fun.
You're getting production every night from every position that you want to put him in, wherever you need to get him. So, but I really like this guy. He's batting over 300, and as an old school baseball guy, I still appreciate dudes that go to the plate and take that sort of approach to it. I get it with analytics. I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon that's just like, you fucking kids, get off my lawn. I get it with analytics, right? But I'm also going to let you know that I, as an old school guy, appreciate a dude that can bat 300 and still belt 10 bombs before the All-Star break, right? Who might be on pace for 25 or 30 home runs and 80 plus RBIs and to bat over 300, right? I can appreciate those things because that's the baseball I grew up on. So Ty France for me is a little bit of an old school, what I thought Vlad Guerrero was going to continue to be. And you mentioned it, right? His last few nights have been pretty awesome. I think he's starting to heat up, and we might see him start to push that batting average closer to 300 here. He's up to, 268, I think, at this point. And, of course, he's hitting the ball country mile every time anytime he wants to. But I like Ty France. I like to watch him. I love guys at first base that are athletic enough to be able to play other places because usually, like, first base is that position where you kind of put the guy who can't run, right? He's the guy. Go over there and figure out how to scoop a short hop because – we need your bat in the lineup, but I don't know where to fucking put you in the field. So,
I'd love to see Ty France in the All-Star game. I really would. Here's the reason I don't think we will. Seattle sucks. They're 28-35. They're 11 games back. And I think, here's the deal. If Seattle is even remotely in contention in the American League West, if they're threatening with Houston, Ty France is a household name.
Oh, yeah.
Along with Julio Rodriguez.
Oh, yeah.
But they're so far back that I think they just, when they see the All-Star ballot, they just literally just skip over the Seattles, the Oaklands, the Detroits, the Kansas Cities, except for Salvi.
I'm not so ignorant to convince myself that the rest of America agrees with me. This is my All-Star ballot, damn it. All right, let's move to second base here. So at second base, you've got Jose Altuve, and we've got another opportunity to discuss. I've got Gleyber Torres. Jose Altuve, talk to me, Ty.
I just look at what Houston has done and who their hitter continues to be when it's sort of the clutch gene with Rizzo, but it's all over the map for Altuve. 277 on the batting average, a skosh under 300. He's still a home run hitter for a second baseman, and I think it's the shots that he hits as a middle infielder that really impressed me with his size and the amount of bat speed that he's able to generate.
Cheated.
No, never does. A phenomenal hitter for Houston. And I like what you did with the cheater thing, and I don't think you intentionally did with the cheater thing. He never gets cheated because he cheats. But
he's always cheating.
Cheating aside, Jose Altuve has continued to athletically produce some of the great numbers from the second baseman. And, as I'm going down the list and thinking second baseman, the All-Star game to me has to have a little name recognition along with the numbers to back that up. And when I think AL second baseman, and if we're playing the name recognition game and you're holding up AL second base, Jose Altuve, first name that comes to mind, he's got the stats to back it up. He's got the production to back it up, and he's just my choice.
Yeah, for sure. It's a worthy choice, right? And I'm not going to sit here and try to bag on Jose Altuve because in full transparency, I wanted to highlight what Gleyber has done in New York, right? Mm-hmm. He's come into a position. He was never the guy in New York until he was the guy, and he played his way into being the guy. It's sort of like what Kiner Falefa's doing right now. Like, who the fuck was that guy 6 months ago?
Right.
But he's played his way to being an asset for a team that is fucking 45-19 or whatever they are right now. Like, it's unreal what the Yankees are doing. And I wanted to highlight Gleyber. I do think that Jose gets the vote. Again, I don't think America is going to agree with me. I do think that Jose gets the vote because, one, name recognition, you mentioned it, and that's a big thing for the All-Star game. Two, he's been there. The Astros are good, right? It's not like you're leapfrogging a guy on a bad team over somebody on a the best team in baseball. I just wanted to highlight Gleyber brings steadiness to the middle infield in New York in one of the toughest markets in baseball, and he hits like a middle of the lineup guy. He makes that lineup so long that they can be as dangerous as they are, but also that pitching staff relies on what he brings, that steady glove in the field. He's one of those rock solid guys for the Yankees, and I wanted to highlight that. I think he's a great player. I do think he's going to be a reserve. I think he plays in the All-Star game, but as a reserve. But for me, if I were picking, I would put Gleyber as a starter because of what he's done to prove to not only that organization, but to that city that he belongs in the pinstripes.
I also tried to space it out a little bit too. I didn't want to have all Yankees on my All-Star team, and I very well could have with the hot start that they're off to, but they have pieces, and it looks like we're going to have to commend their front office, which is something I never thought I would ever say. Talking about a New York baseball team is hats off to their front office. But rather than going and getting –
Dude, how much homegrown fucking talent?
Exactly.
Oh, my God.
Rather than going out and getting the most expensive guy they could find, And the guy with the biggest contract, with the biggest name recognition, with the biggest pop from the fans when he steps to the plate, they got guys that fit the puzzle that they were trying to get together. They got pieces in the right places, and that's what's making this Yankees team a very special baseball team to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry to step on your toes there, but like that was a point I wanted to make and forgot to make about Gleyber. Is like he's a homegrown guy.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't see that very often from the Yankees, those homegrown guys who turn into studs, right? It's usually the Giancarlo Stantons and the guys they went and bought from Tino Martinez and all those guys, Roger Clemens, and bringing those guys in. So, yeah, for sure. A guy like Gleyber being homegrown, it just shows that the Yankees have really shifted, and in a good way, in a really good way. And they've brought some people like Rizzo, and Stanton still fits in terms of his ability, and they brought some bullpen guys in to really fit and pair those veterans with those young guys, and it's clearly it's working. All right, let's talk third baseman here. You've got Jose Ramirez, and so do I. And I think this might be, I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, this might be the most clear-cut starter in the AL. I know that Devers, however the pronunciation goes on that given day. I know that he's got a case to be made, and I know there's some guys that you could say, well, don't forget about him, but Jose Ramirez is just unreal.
Out of the third baseman category, it was the easiest circle to make. There is nobody right now that's putting up the numbers at third base that Jose Ramirez is doing. Yeah, you can mention Devers. You can throw in a Alex Bregman for Houston as a guy that certainly plays good baseball. Eugenio Suarez, I think, is sort of re-resurrected himself after a slow start in Seattle, but he's not. Nobody's touching what Jose Ramirez is doing right now for the Cleveland Guardians. And here's what I think I'm most impressed with about Jose Ramirez and why it was so clear-cut all-star for me. Cleveland doesn't have anybody else. That's it. Jose Ramirez is their guy. And he's got him as a second-place team in the American League Central right now. They're the Cleveland Guardians. That's their name, but they really should be the Cleveland Jose Ramirez's because that's all they have. Yes, we talked about Quan and what a fun start he had to the year. He's gone chilly. The Linsanity has died down over there in Cleveland a little bit.
That's such a good way to put it, too, because that was fever.
It was.
For the first week and a half to 2 weeks of the season.
Fever pitch to start off the year, and it's chilled. And what do you have remaining but two good starting pitchers with Plesac and with Bieber, and then you got Jose Ramirez.
Go ahead, Dark Sage. We'll get to it. Push your question. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it is a two-horse race at the third base position for the AL. But for me, exactly what you said, right? Coming into the season, Boston was supposed to be what Boston has shown over the last few weeks, right? So let's give a little appreciation here for the second-place Cleveland Guardians, who, as you put it so perfectly, like, who else do they have? Who else do they have? And he's still just hitting over 300, 16 bombs, driving in, what's he? I think he's only driven in 30 runs because nobody gets on. Now he's got 60 RBIs. So, but still, every opportunity he gets, he's knocking in runs. His OPS is over 1,000. Like, the guy's unbelievable. Brings a great glove as well. We've talked about the complete player. That's what Jose Ramirez is for sure. All right, we'll give Dark Sage a moment here to post the question. Let's go to shortstop. You've got Xander Bogaerts, and I've got Little Bichette.
Boo! The legacy.
God, I loved watching his dad play though too.
Yeah, both the Bichettes.
I think I have a soft spot for Bo because of Dante.
Amazing. And when he puts a swing on the ball, he puts a hurt onto that baseball.
Mm-hmm.
Here's why I picked Xander Bogaerts. Yeah. And you mentioned and you alluded to Rafael Devers a little bit with Boston. The reason I can't put Devers into that conversation, not only because of the competition he's going up against with Jose Ramirez, but it's the consistency factor. Devers is flashy. Bobby Dahlbeck is flashy. several of the other Boston Red Sox offensive weapons are streaky players. There is one player on this Boston lineup that is the model of consistency that day in and day out is going to hunt for at least one hit.
Mr. Lunch Pail, man.
Is going to get on base at least once per game because he's going to draw out a walk if he can't get on base with a hit, and that's Xander Bogaerts. And not only his offensive numbers, which have been great from the middle infielder perspective, just a shade under 330. That's his model of consistency when he steps up to the plate. So you're talking, a hit every 3 at bats, and even better than that. I love this glove. I love watching him in the field. I love the range that he has and how he is able to play shifts and close down and rob hits. And I know there's a statistical category that we're living in the analytics era of the amount of runs saved from a defensive standpoint. And I know from the shortstop standpoint that he's right up there among the best with them. I love every aspect of his game. It's consistent. It's a guy that's just going to go to work day in and day out. And for me, that's an AL All-Star.
Yeah, you know what Bogaerts reminds me of in the field, and I've thought about this a few different times watching Red Sox games. He reminds me of Omar Vizquel because he's always in the right position. And there are guys like Ozzie Smith. There are guys like Tatis, who are just so supremely gifted athletically that even if they're in the wrong position pre-pitch, they can get to a ball. But guys like Bogaerts and Vizquel used to do this. Like, they are just, it seems like the ball just finds them. But when they have to make a play, they can. And Vizquel was pretty flashy as a shortstop as well. And Bogaerts has a little bit of that kind of, I'm going to flip it out of the glove sort of flashiness. But it seems when I watch Boston games, and I used to live in Rhode Island, so Boston was on all the time.
Right. He
just is always in the right position for the hitter, and balls just don't get by him because Bogaerts is, for as athletic as he might be, he's not Fernando Tatis when it comes to being able to really run down a ball and chew up ground and make a diving catch because he's 6'3" and can sprawl the length of the infield. So that's, to me, with Bogaerts, you mentioned the consistency, and I think that mental preparation that he puts him in position to be consistent both at the plate. He brings his lunch pail every single time he goes to the plate, but also in the field.
You say Vizquel, I say Barry Larkin.
I think that's a good comparison too. Larkin is another guy that he was on both sides of the because Vizquel was not the hitter that Barry Larkin was, for sure. Right. So from a totality perspective, Larkin might be a better comparison in terms of with Bogaerts. But in the field, I just see some of that stuff with Vizquel that I used to love to see from him, that I see a bit of it with Bogaerts. But Larkin, I like that comparison. I like that a lot. All right. So Dark Sage has got a question here. So we'll take a quick little interlude to address. Seems like we're going to get a Dodgers-Yankees World Series, California, New York Mutas, how both teams are basically media darlings. We get New York, Los Angeles. How would both sides spin a losing narrative to make their team still look good? So I'm gonna harken back to
Dark Sage. I like this question.
Dark Sage asked this question about the Dodgers early on too. I like the question. So 2 huge media markets, and then the follow on here. We know sports organizations like to push narratives. We'll never admit they're wrong. This is one example. 2 teams and brands hyped up beyond anything else. Curious how baseball would go to bat for the Dodgers or Yankees to try to spin the narrative. So I want to address this real quick because we just talked about this, I think, a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, how it is very, very surprising how quietly the New York Yankees are 45-19 and in first place by 9 games. And nobody's really done what ESPN does with like LeBron James and what they do with the Patriots and they do with Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, like the focus on them because of the Dodgers, right? I think that's been the influence of the Dodgers. So from that perspective, 100% agree with Dark Sage's comment here. I think as the dog days of summer approach, we're going to start to get that hype for the Yankees from the media. So, as you said, I really like this question. So I'm going to pass to you to address how do you think the losing narrative plays out for in New York if they lose to LA and vice versa if the Dodgers lose to the Bronx Bombers?
You know, I think the narrative for the Dodgers is because the pundits and the experts were so actively pushing the Los Angeles Dodgers World Series talk, because of the experts here on the RosinBaggers podcast that said the Dodgers were going to push to be the top team with historically the best record in baseball
we were
ever.
Talking wins record.
We were talking wins record, man. And to me, the narrative from the national media perspective will immediately fall on how they let this title team slip and the collapse of the LA Dodgers. They won't be talking about the rise of the New York Yankees and the fact that this New York team with essentially no real huge names in a starting rotation was able to put everything together. They're not going to talk about the New York Yankees of old and going out and getting the big Broadway names like we just mentioned. You know, they're putting pieces together. This is not your typical New York Yankees franchise build that we are used to seeing. This is actually, again, vomit coming out. This is weird to say. This is the Yankees doing it the right way.
The right way, right? Yeah, absolutely.
It's a surprise. I think what you're going to hear from the New York media, win or lose, is exactly that. Was that New York found a way to not be the big millionaire spenders. Maybe from the New York Post, you might hear, well, we probably should have spent a little bit more money at the trade deadline. It didn't get our big names to come in at the trade dedeadline. Listen, if New York's where they're at right now at the trade deadline, they're going to go get a name. They're going to go get a whale to come push them through the playoffs, and maybe even, I don't know, unretire Roger Clemens, because he used to always come in during the playoffs just to throw a couple innings.
I'm going to start 4 games and then I'm going to pitch in the playoffs.
Exactly. Typical.
For $60 million.
but I think the narrative spins completely different. If the Dodgers win, it was a "we told you so" mentality. It was everybody knew this was the best team in baseball, and the Dodgers proved it. If they lose, it's going to be the epic collapse, and probably even, I don't know, one could go as far as to say the firing of Dave Roberts if they don't win the World Series after all the expectations and bulletin board material. Yeah, and it's weird saying it's warm for a team
that might win 95, maybe 100 games.
But I think the expectation was there that this was World Series or bust.
Yeah.
For them, for New York, you know, if it's winning in a different fashion, and I think everybody needs to understand that it's not the typical Yankees media love fest that we're used to seeing with New York. If it's lose, it's still the New York media, and they're still going to blame everything on umpires and maybe even a fan that reached over a ball. We're waiting for a Steve Barton moment to happen in New York. Somebody is going to take the fall, and it's not going to be the New York Yankees, because that's the way the New York Post and New York Times operate. But from a winning perspective, you know, this baseball team puts together, it's, hey, we've found another avenue here in New York that we can carve out, and we can do this again.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I know I put you on the spot, but you said it almost every point I wanted to make. I think you hit with a couple of small exceptions. With the Dodgers, I think we don't know what's going to happen in terms of health. So that could be a built-in excuse, right?
Yep.
But if they do lose, if they are healthy and they go lose to the Yankees, it's going to be exactly how you put it. They let this one slip because they were so heavily favored, so hyped coming into the season that the expectation is a World Series championship, and anything less is how'd you let this one get away. For the Yankees, while I think the Yankees themselves in that clubhouse, in that organization, may have felt like they were going to compete, I don't think nationally, and I think that's why, as we said, right, the Yankees are sort of flying under the radar right now. It ain't going to last much longer. We're going to start to get the hype train built because they are the Yankees. But I think right now they're flying a bit under the radar because coming into the season, they had the Blue Jays in the division. They had the Rays in the division, and the Red Sox went out and spent money to keep their own, but bring in, Trevor Story with the big signing. And the Yankees didn't make the big – there was talks of Correa, and then they didn't sign Correa, and he ended up in Minnesota. So this is a different Yankees team. So I think if the Yankees lose, the narrative will be either should have spent more at the deadline, but I think they're going to spend at the deadline. Who's the offseason signing that puts them over the hill, right, or over the hump? That's going to be the narrative. It's this team was so good with what they had. Who's coming in to complement Garrett Cole in the starting rotation? Because they've got Tyone, who's throwing really well, and if he continues the rest of the season, and Nestor's in the conversation for Cy Young right now. So who's that guy that's going to come in and be that 2, 3, maybe even 4 starter to make that rotation 5 full studs deep going into the following year? And then it's the bullpen, right? How do we bolster an already good bullpen, but how do we make that bullpen unstoppable? The Jabba in a rowless combination that they had for a while, and the old Mariano and Wetland and Mariano and whoever else was the setup guy that they would find to plug in there and go sign, right? Who's the guy that's going to bridge the gap between starter, maybe a middle reliever, to a setup guy, or even maybe a couple of setup guys, because they've already got a pretty good bullpen. But I think that's going to be the conversation because their offense, I don't know. And of course, we've got a lot of baseball left to play, but I think if they lose, the narrative is going to be what's the piece that the Yankees, who always historically have spent money, who are they going to go spend money on in the upcoming offseason?
2 things, 2 thoughts, 2 quick thoughts. One on the New York Yankees, how much of this is predicated on previous years and quite frankly, pent up years of high expectations and low results. I think that there's some people right now in the New York media that aren't shouting this baby from the rooftops because they're waiting for the New York fall to happen. They're waiting for the Yankees to snap back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. There's an M for you. One other thing I wanted to mention, doing a little rapping tonight, by the way. One other thing I wanted to mention, Vlad Guerrero Jr. hit a home run earlier tonight. He has now just walked it off against the Baltimore Orioles. So Vlad Guerrero Jr. continuing to rock and roll.
Warm it up a little bit.
Doesn't get a little hot.
Who the fuck wants to pitch to him right now? With the groove he's been in the last, 4 games, I think he's really been just lighting the ball up. Who wants to pitch to him? Who wanted to pitch to him coming into the season, but who wants to pitch to him now?
He's a guy, Tony La Russa, that you walk with 2 strikes.
Yeah. If you're going to do that, that's the guy. All right, let's get back to AL starters. I want to say, Dark Sage, really appreciate the question. Awesome question.
Love that.
Spawned a great conversation. We really appreciate the interaction. All right, so let's move on. We got the infield done here, so let's go to the left field. You've got George Springer starting in the outfield, right? So we won't pigeonhole them into left field versus outfield. So you've got George Springer, Blue Jays. I've got Giancarlo Stanton, and this is where it started to feel a little Yankee heavy for me when I got to the outfield. But I love the piss rods that guy hits. I still go back to, he hit a ball earlier this year to opposite field that never got above 9 feet and got out over an 8-foot wall. He's the only dude that I've ever seen be able to hit a ball just screams off the bat like that. But George Springer, what you got, buddy?
George Springer with, for me, answering a lot of questions this season. You're coming over from Houston. You're entering a Toronto lineup that is absolutely stacked. And then they add pieces around George Springer, and then suddenly you're like, is this guy even going to be on the starting 9 when you throw in guys like Ramil Tapia and the weapons that they have in that outfield? And they move some pieces around. George Springer has more than answered the call for the Toronto Jays, and I think he's been one of the more solid baseball players too, amid Vlad Guerrero, who's just, like you say all the time, fish grease hot. There it is. Wow. That is tough to spit out after 3 cervezas. But George Springer has been playing so good as of late. There was a couple key series that I was watching the Jays, even had him on my featured series. George Springer hitting a couple home runs, 12 home runs, 33 RBIs. And truth be told, I needed a Blue Jay. I needed some guy on this Jays lineup to put into my starting lineup. At the end of the day, I was just balancing things out. I've been really impressed with what he's done since coming over from Houston, and wanted to get a J in there. Just one of the more solid guys in and out. And it was flip flopping here, 3rd and 4th choices for the outfielders, and just decided to give the guy the nod.
Yeah, for sure. This could have easily been. As well, we've talked about the AL East might get 4 playoff teams in.
Mm-hmm.
This AL All-Star starters scenario here could have been the AL East show with a couple of exceptions.
Jose Ramirez and Salvi.
Right,
I think that's the 2 exceptions.
That could have very well been the AL East show, and Salvi and Jose just kind of complimenting everything. But yeah, I mentioned Stanton. I like watching him at the plate. He's a guy that just never ever hits a ball soft.
Oh.
That dude can chop down a tree with a fucking pool noodle. The way he hits the ball. That's what I want to see in the All-Star game. It's a show, right? You mentioned it's the show for the fans. I want to see Stanton hit one in the upper deck that gets out at 120 miles an hour. That's really what I want to see in the All-Star game.
It's fun watching Stanton healthy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that has been the biggest factor.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go to our next outfielder here. We have him in center field, Mike Trout. We agree on this one. I think this is kind of just the obligatory salute to Mike Trout's been the best player in baseball for fucking 12 years.
There's no other reason to put him in your All-Star ballot. I mean, All-Star. Best player in baseball. Probably should be an all-star. Mike Trout's the best player in baseball. Ergo, Mike Trout is first on my all-star ballot to go in. This has nothing to do with the Angels slide and the 14-game skid that they went on, and everything to do with you have to give credit where credit is due, and right now credit's due from Mike Trout. He's the best player in baseball. He continues to rake, I think, 16 home runs so far on the season. That's all irrelevant to the fact that he's the best defensive and offensive and all-around player in the game. He gets the nod from my AL All-Star team.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly, right? He's the guy, right? He's the guy that everybody else is measured to. He's not quite batting 300, but he's batting 294. 16 bombs, 34 ribbies. The guy's just a complete package. And even with all of the injuries he has dealt with over the last handful of years that have just kind of nicked him up, he hasn't lost a step. Usually when guys get those lower body injuries, you see them kind of lose a step. Trout hasn't done that. He's still as rangy and as solid defensively. His WAR is not going anywhere. So Mike Trout, best player in baseball, captain of the All-Star team. You said it perfectly. All right, let's finish up our outfield here, and we agree. Aaron Judge, you can't have probably the biggest donkey in baseball right now, the way he's hitting the ball out of the ballpark, and not put him on your All-Star roster, right?
On cue, hits one tonight to win the game for the New York Yankees to extend their winning streak. All rise, Aaron Judge is statistically the best hitter in baseball in the American League. He's above where Mike Trout's at. Mike Trout certainly has the name recognition. He's the best all-around athlete. I think Aaron Judge statistically has the best hitting stats. And right now, you can't deny what he's done. You talked about the Stantonian blasts that you like to see. You just love to see the force that Aaron Judge puts into that baseball. And like you mentioned with Stanton, it's an all-star game.
Yep.
You can't not look at the AL outfield right now across the American League and find somebody better than either Mike Trout or Aaron Judge. They're the two, for me, absolute locks to be in the All-Star game. And, that's sexy. That's an exciting outfield.
Are you kidding me?
Even in Christmas. But Aaron Judge has had a spectacular season. Could be pushing. I know. Don't get ahead of yourself, Tyson. Could be pushing for the big 6-0 in terms of the home runs by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, honestly.
24 now.
25. Tonight makes 25.
Tonight makes 25.
Yeah. I've been quietly to myself ruminating about what Aaron Judge might look like mid-September as we get into the last few weeks of the season. Is he going to be in the high 50s? Is he going to be chasing the Maris number? And with all of the conversation about PEDs with Bonds and McGuire, and we can have that conversation. Baseball didn't exactly frown upon it. They, in fact, encouraged it, but people can stand how they want on the PED thing. Summer 98 saved baseball, and now they're punishing those guys. But with a guy like Aaron Judge during this era when testing is supposed to be, right, on par, if he gets close to that number, we're going to see some real coverage. And we might see, right, that might be the time where we see the Yankees coverage take off. But I think it's going to happen before that. But quietly to myself, the number looks like there is an outside chance that we might see a 6 hung on the board for Mr. Judge here. And that would be a hell of a fun watch because they're going to be on TV all the time. One, they're the Yankees. Two, as long as they keep winning baseball games, they're going to be on TV all the time. And if we've got a chase for 61, that's going to be fun.
And this is the byproduct of a healthy Aaron Judge. Aaron Judge playing a full season up to this point, knock on wood. Yeah. What I love about this is if indeed the chase does heat up and we see a replay of 1998 and the fan excitement that created and the fan excitement that this would create, knowing that there's no PEDs, or supposedly no PEDs in the game, the fan excitement that this would potentially create. What I would love to see is all the people that are baseball fans but don't really watch baseball, but they say they're baseball fans, and then all of a sudden they're excited because they want to see the home run, and they get to like extra inning games, and the Yankees in an extra inning game, and what the hell is he going to second for? They're going to do a pitch clock next year?
Welcome to 2022.
They're making the bases wider? What is this? How was that bat flip not an ejection? It's
He's
like
going to get thrown at next at bat.
It's going to be great. I'm just excited.
Bring the casuals back out.
Absolutely.
I haven't watched baseball since 1998. Oh man,
Judge.
for sure. All right, and let's finish up here. Let's talk about DH. So we agree. Senor Alvarez is probably the most complete DH in baseball. I know the National League is still kind of getting accustomed to having the DH permanently here. He's a weapon. And we look at guys like Poppy and before him Eddie Murray, right? And Edgar Martinez as well was an absolute weapon as a DH. There's been a long string of players who people thought make the transition to DH, you'll be fine. It takes a different mentality because there is something to be said about being locked into a game in the field and then going to the plate and then making that transition to only go into the plate. We've seen guys struggle in those DH roles, transitioning at the ends of their careers. A guy like Albert Pujols made the transition to DH and he didn't exactly thrive. Now his legs were gone, and I don't want to bash a legend of the game, but as an example, it's not that easy of a transition to just say, yeah, you're just going to hit now, because the game of baseball is it's really all about being engaged. It's a very fickle game. We've talked about that. And a guy like what Houston has is an absolute weapon in the game. They've got one of the best hitters in baseball playing DH for him. How do you feel about him as your all-star starter?
Dude, you nailed a lot of things, and the biggest thing was the way that he is molded into the DH role, where he is serviceable in that role to the likes of an Edgar Martinez. And you mentioned weapon. The dude's a monster. And we're talking about, what sells in baseball. Monster shots sell in baseball. And he's just a formidable force, very intimidating presence at the plate that you really –
and there's 6'4", 6'5".
There's no safe spots to pitch Yordan Alvarez. I've seen pitchers try to go slider outside, low and away, up and in, up and out. He does – if his got a cold hot zone, his is all red.
Right. If you play the show.
Yes.
Yordan Alvarez has dark red, all around.
Yes. He doesn't have a weak spot in his plate appearances. The dude is just a force. And when I'm thinking DHs, great DHs of the game, Poppy, Edgar Martinez, and Yordan Alvarez right now is climbing into those ranks by the way that they utilize him. A lot of people use the DH in a different way, and you alluded to that a little bit with the National League still trying to figure it out. I think the National League is kind of just taking, all right, who's our fourth best outfielder, right, and let's kind of do this by rotation base.
Who had a good day in the cage yesterday?
Yeah, it takes some getting used to do it on a full-time basis, and I think Alvarez has really adapted to that role quite well, and it's paying off dividends for the Astros. Only a couple of days go by before you see Alvarez back in the news just hitting bombs. So he's got off to a tremendous start, and he's not a household name because he plays in that DH role, but he soon will be because of the way he plays.
Oh yeah, for sure. I liken it to something like great pinch hitters, right? You think about a guy like a Matt Stairs, who was always like, he's coming in the 8th inning. He played for the Athletics and had huge hits late in games as a pinch hitter. It's a different mentality. And you can't just, as you said, right, take your fourth outfielder and say, well, you're going to be DH, right? It's not just that. You've got to have guys that embrace that role. And as you grow up, you don't have DHs at every level. And even still, when you're the best hitter and you're as big and as athletic as a guy like Yordan Alvarez is, you're going to play in the field because you don't have 9 fielders that you can put over a guy like him. There's no baseball team that I've ever seen at lower levels that's going to say, nah, Yordan, you're good. Just stick to hitting, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's a change. It's a total change in that being engaged in the game from pitch 1 through out number 27 it's tough. It's tough. And for guys like him that can excel in those roles, it's very special for sure. All right. That brings us to our conclusion here. I want to open the floor. Closing comments, Ty.
Well, closing comments. We've mentioned it a couple times and alluded to it a little bit on my State of the Union, but the magical time has arrived, and maybe the most fun that any baseball fans can have is watching the game in its most pure form get played out over the course of the next couple weeks in my home state in Nebraska. So we head to Omaha at Charles Schwab Field, and June 17th through the 27th, 10 days of baseball heaven as it's the College World Series. Going to start off with Oklahoma and Texas A&M. Coming up on Friday at 1, we've got the Irish, their darling story after knocking off the top-seeded Tennessee Volunteers, play Texas Longhorns. Fuck Texas, go Notre Dame. 6 p.m. start time there on Friday. Then Saturday, the Omaha Hogs, as they're called, because of the Dave Van Horn connection to Nebraska. Of course, Coach Nebraska and Alex Gordon, Shane Comine, and those great College World Series teams for the Huskers. Van Horn returns, so there's a bunch of people on the Arkansas bandwagon, Pig Sueys. They're going up against Stanford. We don't really care about Stanford because they're way out west, and they're on a different continent, so we don't focus much on them. 1 p.m. start time there. Too. Oh, yeah. So then we get Ole Miss and Auburn finishing things off Saturday, 6 p.m., running Rebels. When they wear their powder blue jerseys, they look like the 1985 St. Louis Cardinal jerseys. So, of course, I'm cheering for the Rebels, but you love the story of Auburn this year. The 14th team in the nation. Not a lot of people even had Auburn on their radar. in terms of when this whole thing started. They play in the SEC, which is by far and away the best baseball conference in the world. So how do you escape that without damages? They make a turn to the show. I follow a guy on Twitter who is a huge college baseball nut, but is also a big Auburn guy. And so I'm excited to see him in Omaha and get to catch up with him on Twitter. But nonetheless, for the next 10 days, I'm going to divert your attention away to all of the great things that are happening around Major League Baseball. And I'm going to say, catch some college baseball, because this is by far, if you are remotely a baseball fan, you're going to have a little bit more love for it watching the College World Series and watching the emotion and passion that these kids play with. It's fun, it's raw, it's pure, and it's for the love of the game, and I absolutely love it.
Beautiful. Well said. It's June, right? If you're a baseball fan, you can miss some Major League Baseball games right now to tune the fuck in to what's going on in Omaha, because it is magical. It is pure. It is for the love of the game, but it is so magic. Just the games, the way they play out, and some of the unbelievable comebacks that you see. It's so raw, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. I can't wait to watch some of these games coming up. I'm going to close with Braves are up 8-2. Selfishly, actually, they just closed them out. So we're up to 14.
14 games, 2 straight weeks without a loss.
We're up to 14. We've got the Cubbies, right? And I'm saying we as if I'm not a fucking fan of another team in the AL East. But selfishly, I want Braves Giants to really be the chase series for 20. And then next week, if we get to 8, it would be what? 18, because they play midweek. If they get to 18, I'm going to highlight the fucking Braves and Dodgers, because we're going to be really chasing at that point. So unless you don't want to have me highlight the Braves again, root for the Braves, because we're chasing history. I know my dad's excited out there. I gotta give him props for as a Braves fan anyway. So
should be. This has been fun to watch.
All right,
Red Sox might get to 500.
Oh,
they're one game away.
All right, Ty, great episode, man. Really appreciate you every week. For the Big Stove, I know he can't be here, but we're still going to shout him out. We appreciate everything he does for the show. All the overlays you see, that man finds time to do them for us because he wants to stay engaged. We can't wait to get him back on the show. This has been episode 13 of the RosinBaggers podcast. We are out.